Hey, hello, welcome back. Normally we write microservices or a REST endpoint to fulfill the business logic. We write it beautifully so that our endpoint returns 200 with the expected response. But most of the time we don't care about the latency, meaning how much time this endpoint is going to take to fulfill the request and how much time it will take to respond back to the consumer or the client. If this time is more than, let's say, 5 seconds or 10 seconds, then you can already imagine that your consumer or customer is already frustrated. So in this video, using Prometheus, we will push summary matrix type to calculate the latency for each of your endpoint in your application. Also, we will define an alert when your specific endpoint in your application is taking more than, let's say, 5 seconds or 10 seconds to respond back, so that you can act on it and you can check in your application what is wrong. So let's get started. I already imported a project into the Eclipse. Here you can see this is just a simple Spring Boot application. I use 1.5.22 release for the Spring Boot, and here you can see as I added a Spring Boot starter web. So if you watch my previous video, you already know that to enable Prometheus we need one artifact ID, one dependency need to be added from io.prometheus, whose artifact is, as we are using a simple client for Prometheus and we are using Spring Boot, so simple client Spring Boot. Version, let's take version available 0.0.21. So as soon as you add this, you go to your main class and annotate with enable Prometheus endpoint. That's it. So as per our problem statement, we want to calculate the latency for the Spring Boot endpoints or the REST endpoint. So let's create one class. I will name it, let's say, just hello world, and this is my REST controller where I'm going to define the endpoint. So I'm defining it, I'm annotating it with the REST controller. And then what is our problem statement? So we want some endpoints so that we can calculate the latency, meaning the time taken to serve the request. So let's go to project, define, let's say, 2 endpoints. Okay, so I have these 2 endpoints. So I want how much time this hello endpoint is taking and how much time this by endpoint is taking, and we need to push this to Prometheus matrix. So we can write a code individual also here by defining a summary, but that's a headache that we have to define, we have to repeat the code, we have to duplicate the code. So what we will do, we will use a resource filter. Okay, I defined one resource filter class. What this resource filter class will do, so whenever request going to any of my endpoint, it will filter that request. I will define it as a component. So to do that, we need to implement it with filter. So java8.servlet, and then you implement all the unimplemented methods of the filter. So here I am using a filter from Java8 Servlet. If you are using JAX RS in your project, then you need to implement the container request filter and container response filter. In this container request filter, you have one method filter which is taking the request context, and here in the response filter you have one method filter which is taking the request context and response context. So let's continue the filter. So here what we need to do, that whenever somebody is calling our endpoint, so we need to capture the time first. Okay, after capturing the time, what we will do, we will do filter chain dot do filter, and we will pass request /request and response. And after that, what we need to do, on the response, check this status and calculate time taken. Okay, so capture the time. So the first will be, so capture the time. Let me define one double with start time initialize it to 0 and start time equal to, take the time from system dot nano time. Okay, so we have a time here, and what we have to do here, we have to calculate the end time, because our objective is to response check the status and they calculate the time taken. So how we are going to do that? Let's define one more variable. This is complete duration, and you do current system dot nano time, that's the current time, minus what is the start time, and this nano time is indeed long, so to convert into a double we need to typecast it to double. Okay, and now this is the time in nanosecond, but we need in the seconds. So what we will do, we will divide it with time unit dot second 2 nanos, and just provide one long because it's expect long duration, but you need to convert it into, let's say, typecast into a double. So this is the duration you received. So we have a duration, and we are going to send a request to the endpoint from the resource filter. But let's define a request response. Let's convert this request response to HTTP servlet request. Request equal to typecast it to HTTP servlet request, and that's the servlet request, right? Same thing, just okay, I'll not copy HTTP servlet response equal to typecast HTTP servlet response and servlet response. Okay, so now we have a request and response, but now this method will be called for all the endpoints. How we will know that user called hello or user called bye, user called get here, or if you have any post, then if user called the post endpoint with the path, and what is the response, it's a 200, 400 or something like that, right? So for that we will check in the request what is the method and what is the URL which user is hitting. So let's define one string method where we will take from the request.get method, where we have a method call which will return you the method of the HTTP request which user hit, and at the same time let's find out the path. So that's also in the request dot get request URI. Okay, we found out the path, we found out the method. Now we need to find out what is in the response. Okay, so what we will do, what is the status, right? So string status response dot get status, but this will not work because get status in the int. So to convert it into the string, go to integer class and call toString method, That's it. We have all the requisite, right? So here if you see what we have a method, we have path, we have status, and we have everything. Now only thing is we need to push it to the Prometheus. So for that we need to define one summary matrix type. How we do that? As I said in my last videos also, do it as a log. How you define a log? That is private static final, and summary is from Prometheus.client. So define one summary, and from summary class you have build method which is taking name and health. So go back, summary dot build, define name, and health, yeah, and then register, right? This is all the steps we were doing in counter and gauge matrix type also. So name is the relevant name for the matrix. HTTP server request duration, and that's in the seconds. Go to help so that if somebody is coming and checking it, he should understand time taken to serve the HTTP requests in seconds. Okay, register. But what we are missing here, this is okay for one endpoint, but we need it to be common. So we have label names in Prometheus where you can define any label name. Okay, so what I need method that I can get, meaning different method name, get methods like a get, post, put or something. I want path also to be printed in my matrix. I want status also to be printed in my matrix. So you can define any number of parameter here, label names, which you have in your, let's say, business logic. Okay, you can put, so I have method, path and status, so that's the reason I defined here method, path and status. That's it. So let's take this summary. So we have all the things available. So summary dot define labels. So from labels, first one is method, another one was path, another one was status. Okay, when we have everything, earlier what we used to do, it's a count, right, in the counter matrix type, but now we have a lot of method given. So you can see get, start timer, time. So let's go to summary class. So here we have a lot of method. So what is important, so if you check our code, what we want to do is just we want to observe this duration, right? So what we want to do, just observe the duration. Any request coming here, going from this filter, going to the filter chain, coming to this, serving this endpoint. When it's returning back, we are calculating a duration, time taken, and just we need to observe that duration. So we have one observe method in summary. If you check that, observe what it is taking. It's taking a double. It is using a counter, which is like a count, adding +1, because whenever there is an endpoint hit, you want to show that one time that endpoint is hit, like this, right? So this endpoint is hit 2 times, this endpoint is hit for 1 time, so we want to show that. So it is doing inside that, and it is adding the amount. What is this quantile value? We will check in next video that what is quantile and why it's important in summary and the histogram. So we'll check this in next video. We'll just focus this one. This is null in our case, so it's okay. Only we will do a count and sum. Let's go back here. So we are going to observe the duration. Okay. Okay, that's it. Our code is done. So let's run it and check how it is started. Tomcat is started. Let's go and hit localhost 8080. We have Prometheus expose here, so it's nothing here as of now. Sorry, 8080, and we have endpoint at hello. Okay, hello world, and we have, let's go here, hit one time. So here you can see I hit this by the blank one, right? Localhost 8080. So I got 404 here for this gate, and it took around 0.02 seconds. Another one is Prometheus endpoint, which we are hitting. We hit one time and it took around 0.05 seconds. Hello endpoint, which we hit one time, it took it like its counter is 1 and returned 200, and it took around 0.012 second. Let's hit one more time, so we know it was 0.012. So it's this time it took less, and we have sum of all, so it's 0.09 seconds. If I hit one more time, we will have the another one, let's 0.023. This is a sum of all the times taken by this endpoint to serve the request. 3 times it served and we got 0.023. There are some endpoints with 3 or 4, some are with 4 or 4. It will capture everything because we wrote the logic in the filter. So any endpoint which is being hit in our application will be captured. Okay. So now the next thing is, because this is not our objective, so this is giving you performance, but our last objective is, let's say if you have the average time this endpoint hello, if you have, let's say, request took around 5 seconds to respond back, then you need to trigger an alert for a developer so that he can check and act on it. What is going wrong? Why my application is taking 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 15 seconds to respond back to the user for the simple endpoint?